So, day one of the general election campaign, and Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer have hit the ground running, taking their pitch to voters around the country. The Prime Minister, who's just arrived in the Scottish Highlands, started his day in Derbyshire, where he told people to put their trust in him and the return of economic stability. The Labour leader was in Kent, declaring it was time to end the chaos. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
All over the country, applause prompts are working the crowds.
That is upside down.
Placards are being choreographed. The election is being staged.
The plan is working.
Rishi Sunak started his day in Nottingham, relentlessly repeating his campaign message.
And with bold action and a clear plan to take some bold action, I'm prepared to stick to a plan.
In interviews, the Prime Minister said there would not now be a flight to Rwanda taking off before the general election. There had been speculation a plane deporting asylum seekers could come just before polling day.
We will ensure that the next generation grows up smoke-free.
A brand new promo video already out of date. Rishi Sunak's bill banning smoking is one of a number of legislative casualties of the early election. There isn't time to pass it.
But look, at long last, the election has been called. The time has come and the wait is over.
Keir Starmer, campaigning in Kent, was also relentlessly on script.
And we've had 14 years of going round and round in circles, getting absolutely nowhere. Chaos and division, feeding chaos and division.
Rishi Sunak called on Keir Starmer to take part in a TV debate every one of the campaign's 6 weeks, knowing that the Labour leader currently plans to stick to 2.
So you're looking forward to all the football?
In Wales, where they haven't qualified for the Euros, Rishi Sunak's question was met with silence.
Some people will be supporting anyone that plays England, but I won't be, but...
Rishi Sunak won on mileage, finishing his first day of campaigning in Inverness.
This lens in the middle, please. Thank you.
Tory strategists will be relieved the Reform Party launch was missing one famous face. Nigel Farage said the snap election meant he didn't have time to cultivate a seat and run for Parliament, but would campaign.
I'll do that, but I'll also, as the year goes on, be increasingly in America, because I think Trump back in the White House makes the world a much safer place. So for those who think, thank goodness, he's gone away. No, I haven't gone away at all. And at some point, I'll be back as a candidate as well. This just is not the right time for me.
The Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, visited Tory-held Cheltenham and asked for Labour supporters to lend him their votes in seats like this one.
We've seen so many parts of the country where it's a vote for the Liberal Democrats that will get rid of the Conservative MP.
While Rishi Sunak was reminding voters of his COVID record devising furlough, the Cabinet Secretary was telling the COVID inquiry Rishi Sunak's Eat Out to Help Out plan happened without him ever having been told about it. He also spoke of general failings in Boris Johnson's government.
Duplication of effort, overlapping meetings, kind of good people were just being smashed to pieces. That's what I saw.
Right, so we've got some time for some questions. Let's open it up. Who's got some hands up? Right, OK, let's start there and let's go there. Brilliant. Right,
so, thank you and welcome to Area Wash.
In Distribution Centre, it turned out 2 questioners in high-vis jackets didn't actually work there, but were specially invited Tory councillors.
Right, you had a question. Yeah.
Prime Minister, well, thank you for coming to Area Wash this morning. I imagine you're a pretty busy guy right now.
A reminder that not all is as it seems in election staging. On your screens for the next 6 weeks.
Well, Gary joins me now in Central Lobby in Westminster. Gary, you've had a long day. How's it gone for you and them?
Message discipline is back. We had Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn at the last general election. You have 2 people here clearly who are capable of learning and reciting ad nauseam slogans and learnt scripts. And that's what they're doing so far. At some point, some spontaneity will break into this campaign, but you didn't really see it on day one. What everybody's wondering about is, are there any dividends yet, any signs that the early election is working for Rishi Sunak? Well, some around him would say, look what Nigel Farage said there today, saying that if it had been a later election, he might have cultivated a constituency, he might be running. Maybe that's a sign of the wisdom of this early election from Rishi Sunak's perspective, but I'm not entirely sure about that. There were very strong indications that Nigel Farage was going to keep his focus on the United States whenever this election happened. The other thing, casualty, as it were, of an early election that we've seen today is the wash-up, as it's called, when they race through those bills that the two main parties, both sides of Parliament, can agree on, and that's been going on. But in the process, you get bills that can't be agreed on or haven't proceeded far enough yet, and they simply go in the dustbin. And they include what the Prime Minister said was one of his great legacy issues: the smoking ban and no-fault eviction, the ban on no-fault eviction. But today, yet again, just like yesterday, you've had a whole load of Tory MPs saying, why the early election? And when I caught up with Rishi Sunak at the beginning of his first day of campaigning in Nottingham today, that's what I asked him. You announced the election against the backdrop of the inflation figures. You said it all proved the economic plan was working. So why not show off the economic plan a bit longer, for a few more months? Bask in the glory of it. Why go early?
Well, I know there's more work to do and people are only just starting to feel the benefits of the change, but it is clear that our economic plan is working. Inflation is now back to normal. The economy is growing at a healthy rate. Wages have been rising faster than prices for months in a row now, and energy bills are coming down. So the economic stability that I promised is now been delivered, and the question for the country is the future.
You're a Prime Minister with a majority. You could hang around longer. You could show people more of that plan in action. It's just a bit fishy. It doesn't quite add up. It suggests that you don't think the plan is going to be delivering wonderful dividends by the autumn, when you could have an election.
Well, here is the track record of the last 18 months when it comes to the economy. Inflation, when I became Prime Minister, was running at around 11%. It's now back to normal, just over 2%. Wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year. Energy bills have fallen by almost £500. The economy at the start of this year was growing faster than pretty much all of our major competitors. And whilst I know it will take time for people to feel the benefits of all of that, it's clear that that plan is working. I stuck to it even when it was difficult. And that's what leadership is about.
You say you've got a plan on immigration, but if I understand you from earlier interviews today, you don't think a flight will take off before the general election. Nobody's going to get the chance to test that policy which you've brought in, the Rwanda flights, and test whether it works, see whether it works. You're going to the electorate before it's been tested. Again, a bit fishy.
Well, immigration is an important issue in this election, and the security of our borders is important.
Why not wait?
Well, let's just look at what we've done. When it comes to legal migration...
That. Why not wait for the flights to take off, let people see whether they have an impact, a deterrent impact, creeping into the numbers crossing the channel?
So if I could just answer the question, on migration, legal migration, the numbers are too high. I've said that I'll bring them down. They're already down by a quarter this year. That shows that the plan is working. And when it comes to illegal migration, we've put all the plans in place to get flights off to Rwanda in July. So we've detained people, we've hired the caseworkers, we've booked the airfield, the flights are ready. All of that is done.
So wait.
But the elections are about the future and the choice. I believe in a deterrent. Now, I believe that if people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We should be able to remove them to a safe third country like Rwanda. That's how we'll break the cycle. Keir Starmer doesn't believe in that. He would scrap that scheme if he was Prime Minister, making us the soft touch of Europe, offering an amnesty to illegal migrants, and that's the choice that people have at this election.
You know why I'm asking this question? Because you will have had discussions in the room when you decided on having an early election. When you call an election, how you call an election frames the early part of that election. And people don't understand why you're going early. We're told it's always been in your mind to go early. And you were telling Tory MPs and anyone else who would listen, you were going to have an election in the second half of the year. If I told you I'm going to lend you some money but not ask for it back until the second half of the year, and then I asked for it back 2 days into the second half of the year, you'd think that was a bit slippery. It's all a bit odd.
Yeah. Economic stability has been restored. That's what I said I would do as Prime Minister, and now is the time to turn to the future, and that's what we're doing. And on illegal migration, there's a clear choice. If I'm Prime Minister, we will get flights off to Rwanda. I believe that that's an important part of how you stop the boats. You need a deterrent. Multiple other European countries now agree with that approach. Keir Starmer doesn't, and that's a simple choice.
If it's a great policy, show it in action. Hang around a few more months.
That's a simple choice for the country when they're making their decision. Do they want to stop the boats? Do they believe that that needs a deterrent? And if they do, that's what I'll deliver. I'm prepared to take bold action. I've got a clear plan. That's how I'll deliver a secure future for our country. And Keir Starmer won't. There's a choice at this election. Who can you trust to take bold action, will stick to a clear plan to deliver a secure future? That's what I'm about.
That word security and stability, you talk about that. Can you say, hand on heart, vote for the Conservative Party for stability?
Yes.
Some people think that sounds a bit hollow given the last few years.
Oh, because I have restored economic stability to our country.
I'd ask about the Conservative Party.
I'm the Conservative Prime Minister.
For how long? They were looking like they were coming for you not that long ago. You were having meetings discussing that.
I think you're interested in Westminster process, the country's interested in the substance. And the substance is inflation has now returned to normal, wages are growing faster than prices for almost a year, energy bills are falling, the economy is growing, and whilst I know it will take time for people to feel the full benefits of that, it's clear that our plan is working.
Prime Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now, from Rwanda flights to student numbers, migration is shaping up to be a major issue in this general election. Our data and fact-check team have been looking at how the main parties' records compare on one key measure. That's legal migration, which the government has more direct control over. New stats out today reveal net migration, that's the number of people coming here legally, minus those leaving, is down. That's from a record high in 2022 of 764,000. Today's figures show that last year this dropped 10% to 685,000. The vast majority of people arriving are on work or student visas, or their families, 10 times more than the number claiming asylum. Since the Conservatives took office in 2010, net migration has rocketed from 256,000 to nearly 700,000 today. In that context, the latest drop doesn't look quite so significant. But what about the last Labour government? Well, when Tony Blair took office in 1997, he inherited very little net migration from the Conservatives. By 1997, net migration had crept to 48,000. By the time Labour left in 2010, it was more than 5 times higher. The government spending watchdog, the OBR, says more migration helps grow the economy. Though when it comes to wealth per person, the picture is less clear. The Conservatives told us voters have a clear choice between their bold plan to control migration or going back to square one with Labour. Labour told us today's stats show total Tory chaos, and it will bring in proper plans to link the points-based immigration system with boosting skills in the UK.
Well, Labour's Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper accused the Conservatives of total failure over their immigration numbers policy, saying they couldn't clear up their own chaos. According to the Austrian Chancellor, 15 EU member states back the government's Rwanda policy. So when I spoke to Yvette Cooper a short time ago, I asked her if the Tories were actually leading on this issue.
In fact, what other European countries are saying is that we should be working in partnerships, a very different way to the Rwanda scheme. What we heard from the Prime Minister today was, in fact, an admission that the Rwanda scheme is a con. They knew it was going to unravel over the summer. It's costing £500 million for just around 300 people, and that is only 1% of asylum seekers. So that is not a working or workable plan, and instead what we need to do is put that money into border security instead.
Isn't the truth on small boats, and also you talk about work visas, you don't have a policy, as we know, on reducing student visas, on reducing health and social care visas, for example, unless there's something you're not telling us. It seems to be that you're trying to give the impression you're going to dramatically cut numbers. You don't have the policies to back it up. You haven't unveiled them.
We set out some proposals last year around getting rid of the 20% unfair discount on overseas recruitment. The government has adopted that now. That's welcome. And there are some other measures that they've put in place that we do support. But Unless you deal with the proper skills shortages, this isn't going to be solved. For example, engineering visas have gone up at the same time as engineering apprenticeships have halved. Those things are related, and that's why what we would do is properly link the points-based system to plans on tackling skills shortages and tackling the need for the skills that we've got in the economy, so that there's not continually the overseas recruitment as an alternative to investing in training.
You as a party, Rachel Reeves, your Shadow Chancellor, has copied and pasted a lot of the Tory tax and spend commitments, for example, the national insurance cut, the debt rule and so on. That implies then pretty eye-watering cuts to your patch, law and order. Is that the case?
So we've identified on policing areas where we believe that you can make savings that can then be put back into frontline policing. So, for example, the Police Foundation, it's based on the independent work of the work of the Independent Police Foundation. They estimated between £700 and £800 million of savings could be achieved by doing new joint procurement arrangements. Instead of having 43 forces all doing their own multiple contracts, we've been much more cautious. We've estimated around half of that would go into frontline policing, and that would fund around 13,000 additional police, PCSOs, specials to be able to work in our communities.
Savings, as you and I both know, they very rarely materialise in the amount promised by politicians going into an election. If you don't get those savings, would you be prepared to borrow to fund the police more effectively? Would you be prepared to raise taxes to fund the police more effectively?
So I've been a former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, so I know that it is possible to put in place programmes that deliver procurement savings. I've seen that done before from government and worked on that in government as well.
Really?
And
even, you know, the court service is on its knees, the prison service...
Don't get me wrong, there are certainly areas where the courts, the prison service is a huge problem, and that's partly because the government, although they allocated the money, the funding was there, they've just failed to actually deliver the prison places that they promised.
Yeah, but as things stand, you're following their spending plans on that.
Well,
so that implies massive cuts to a service that's already on its knees.
Well, except that on policing, what we're saying is we've identified where the savings would be, and we've been much more cautious than the Police Foundation. It's based on independent work, and we think we can make sure we can get that investment.
Just finally, your former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, looks like he's going to stand as an independent against your party. What's your message to him?
Look, we're campaigning for a Labour government. This is the chance to change the country. The Labour Party has changed under Keir Starmer's leadership, and he was right to do that.
Does his friend Diane Abbott get the whip back?
So I hope that that situation is going to be sorted out as rapidly as possible, and I've said so before.
So that's a yes. In the next 24 hours, you get the whip back.
Well, we need to be. I hope this is going to be sorted out as soon as possible. But as a shadow cabinet member, I can't comment on an independent process, and I'm sorry about that. But I do want it to happen as quickly as possible.
It's got to complete within 24 hours because of the dissolution of Parliament, hasn't it?
I do hope it's going to be sorted as swiftly as possible, but I can't comment on it as an independent process.
Yvette Cooper, thanks very much.
Thanks, Cathy.
Well, as Gary mentioned earlier, it's known as the wash-up, a race against time to ensure important bills don't end up on the scrap heap when MPs decide what gets dropped and what becomes law before Parliament is dissolved. 16 bills are heading into their final stages and could be fast-tracked into law. Among those which are expected to pass are the Victims and Prisoners Bill, including measures to establish a compensation scheme for those affected by the infected blood scandal, and one for victims of the Horizon scandal. The Post Office Offences Bill would quash the criminal convictions of sub-postmasters who were wrongly prosecuted. But others are expected to fall, like the Prime Minister's flagship anti-smoking bill, which would have banned vapes and cigarettes for anyone born after 2009. No chance, too, for the Renters Reform Bill, which would have strengthened rights of tenants and scrapped no-fault evictions. And the Criminal Justice Bill is also expected to be left by the wayside. That proposed expanding police powers, as well as plans to criminalise those creating sexually explicit deepfakes, which this programme has investigated. Let's go now to Aisha in Leeds.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, if the polls are right and the Conservatives are facing a red wall of gains in the so-called red wall, the former Labour heartlands they won in 2015. Take Dudley in the West Midlands. The constituency boundary there was changed last year. But taking account of those changes, the 2019 election result would have given the Tories a majority of just over 13,500. The seat is now one of Labour's prime targets. Our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, is there.
It was here, in Dudley, in 2011, that a company called Westfield produced the world's first commercially viable electric racing car.
At the last election, red wall seats like Dudley were the battleground, the weapon of that war, levelling up.
And we will back that vision. This government will back that vision. This is a government that backs Britain and believes in British innovation.
In 2024, it's a battleground again, but it's Labour tanks on the lawn. The place they launched their local election campaign, and the messaging, pretty similar.
Local growth plans. That's the commitment we make today.
This time, the Tory message is different. The message is economic.
The plan is working, and we have that economic stability back.
Among voters in places that last time lent the Conservatives their vote, it's getting a mixed reception.
OK, Rishi Sunak, he reckons his economic plan's working. What do you think?
I don't think so. Nobody likes him. I don't think so.
Nobody likes him? That's a bit harsh.
No, it's not harsh, to be honest. You have to look at the economical situation. It's so bad, so poorly. They have to see the people, they don't have, no jobs.
Rishi Sunak would say, look, yesterday inflation figures were coming down. That's down to him. Do you believe him?
I don't think so.
Do you agree with him?
Well, it seems to be working, doesn't he?
He's come a long
To a
way since
degree,
Liz Truss messed things up.
He's had a lot to do, and it seems to be working. Whether it's enough or not, I don't know.
I'll say Rishi Sunak.
Get rid of him.
Yeah, I'd say
She disagrees.
Yeah, she does. But yeah, Keir Starmer, he hasn't shown anything yet. But I'd put my backing on Rishi Sunak.
On these streets, though, that view appears to be in the minority.
Rishi Sunak, he says his economic plan's working. What do you think?
No, it isn't. No, it's not. It's not working. No.
Labour's messaging today, though, is, well, repeated rather a lot.
All we ask now, humbly, is the opportunity to change our country. Change.
The problem for Rishi Sunak, even Tory voters of old in this red wall seat are open to that Labour messaging, although they still need some convincing.
Within the next 6 weeks, when the detail comes out, I think that's when to make a decision.
So Keir Starmer could end up winning your vote if you get those details?
We'll see.
Yes.
Last November, Dudley was awarded £40 million of levelling up money. But do voters feel like their town is on the up? A town that is also about to get a much-needed tram stop linking it to the West Midlands Metro.
Do you feel like you've been levelled up?
No.
No,
yet.
you don't think either?
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. So do you think it's coming?
Hope so, because tram is coming, so we have a hope. So let's see.
I say it's getting there. I say yeah, it's getting there. Even though you might see things that are probably abandoned or whatever, but I think things are probably are turning around.
Do you feel levelled up much in the last 5 years?
No.
I don't know who to vote for.
5 years ago, last general election, did you think the same then?
No. I knew who I was voting for.
Who were you voting for
Yeah.
then? Who were you voting for then?
I don't really want to say.
Did he have the same sort of hair as you?
Maybe.
None of the above may be just as an attractive of choice for many voters in this seat in this election. Either way, 5 years in and in the race for the red wall, the electoral tectonic plates have completely shifted.
And Paul joins us from Dudley with some news on candidate selection. Paul.
Yeah, Labour might have designs on this seat. They haven't actually selected a candidate yet. That's the same in about 60 locations across the country. Labour's campaign chief, Pat McFadden, said That'll probably be sorted in the next couple of days. It's not just a problem for the Labour Party, though. We've been shown an email sent by Conservative Party HQ to prospective candidates asking for people to stand forward for 93 seats. And when people have asked, well, when's the deadline, they've been told by Conservative Party HQ, just 48 hours. Now, in truth, a lot of these seats are Labour strongholds. They're looking for what's called a paper candidate, just for someone to put their name on the list. But a few of them should be pretty attractive to Conservatives. You've got, for example, Bury St Edmunds, Tory since 2015. Basildon and Billericay, the majority there is 20,000. Associations we've spoken to are pretty livid. They've been left in such a state of unpreparedness. This is an election that hasn't just been sprung on the nation, it's been sprung on the Conservative Party itself.
Paul,
thank you very much, Paul. Back to Kathy in Westminster.
Aisha, thank you. Well, the Reform Party UK leader Richard Tice has confirmed he'll be standing in the Boston and Skegness seat. But it was the party's honorary president, Nigel Farage, who's been the focus of all the speculation today. I sat down with Mr Tice earlier and put it to him that Mr Farage had been all set to announce his candidacy next week, and then he pulled out. So had Rishi Sunak's snap election call thrown all their plans up in the air?
No, not at all, actually. The truth is the snap election was called because the Tories are terrified of us going up in the polls and them going down the polls. And what they were facing, if they ran it through the summer, was that we would overtake them. That
You're
was the direction
flattering
of
yourself
travel.
a bit there, though, aren't you?
But look, you see, everybody said 3 years ago at 1% they laughed at us, including the Tories and the media. Now the Tories are absolutely terrified of us. That's why all they're doing is attacking us. The truth is, vote Tory, get Labour.
Is it a bit of a blow to your ego, though, that, you know, the Tories are mighty relieved that he's not going to be standing as a candidate?
I'm thrilled that Nigel's campaigning with us, and what we can see from the Tory reaction today is they are terrified. They know that they've broken Britain. They know that they've betrayed everybody with the mass migration numbers that came out this morning. Healthcare. We're getting slower healthcare, more health delays, ambulance delays, A&E delays, greater waiting lists, the greatest ever. Why? Because of the huge extra pressure, because the Tories have betrayed Britain on mass immigration.
Well, the waiting list could be just as much to do with the fact we've got an ageing population and a sicker population.
It's all to do with
migrants
extra
tend to be
pressure
pretty young.
No, actually, it's all to do with the extra surge in demand.
What, the NHS waiting list? A lot of migrants are young. They're not putting particular pressure on.
You're saying that none of the 2.5 million people who've arrived here in the last 2 years, none of them are using the NHS to do it?
No, I'm just
it's a serious contributor.
I'm querying your evidence for that.
Well, the evidence of that is that the waiting list, all elements of healthcare is a disaster, and therefore the outcomes are worse, our excess deaths are worse. And here's the other point. The evidence is we've got the longest per person recession since records began 70 years ago.
And you really think that net zero immigration, which is your policy, would help the economy?
Absolutely, because guess what it does? It drives up demand for labour, which means the price of labour of the least well off, the lowest paid, goes up. That's a good thing. It also drives capital investment, because if businesses can't afford labour, guess what they do? They invest in capital equipment. It's basic economics, and I'm the only person who's calling it out.
On the contrary, the basic economics is that the economy is fuelled by migration, and that's why successive administrations... Hang on, I let you finish, you've got to let me finish. That is why successive administrations have allowed migration to flourish.
So we've got the lowest growth decade for 70 years. We've got the longest recession per person for 70 years.
Yeah, but some of that's to do with Brexit, which you egged on.
That is evidential proof.
And you don't think Brexit has a part to play in that?
None at all. None at all? Because, Kathy, more people are coming, which proves my point. People want to come to the UK, but the reality is we've got lower wages. The mainstream media cannot deal with the fact that Brexit is a great opportunity. I accept that this government,
a lot of people who
toxic,
voted for Brexit don't think that it was a great opportunity. They're now getting remorse.
Not at all. There's no remorse. There's the only sadness.
No remorse?
There's no the
Another
remorse.
false fact.
The remorse is that this Tory government has failed to take advantage of a great Brexit opportunity.
You say you'll stand candidates in every seat apart from in Northern Ireland. How many candidates have you got ready to run?
We've got about 500 approved and allocated, and that's changing literally by the hour. And we've got a couple of hundred going through the process, so we'll stand, as I say, 630. There's always a little bit of filling in the jigsaw as you approach the final days.
And you've got the money for this?
Yeah, we're well on track, no problem at all.
I mean, you've said you're going to basically ruin the Tories. They'll be out of action if you have your way.
They deserve to be ruined. They deserve to be replaced, given what they've done to this country. It's appalling.
If you don't get a single MP, do you pack up shop and go home?
This is a medium-term project.
Medium-term plan.
It's a medium-term game.
So Nigel Farage could stand at the next election, could he, as an MP?
Let's wait and see. Nigel's he's.
But that works better for him. That timing. He can do the American election and then come back and do another
Nigel's 60.
UK
He's got to
one.
work out what he wants to do. And we're very good friends. And he's delighted that he's campaigning for us. And he's got some fantastic advice onwards and upwards.
Richard Tice, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So the search for votes has begun, and so have the promises. But the public spending plans, which would have to pay for them, are extremely tight. Our economics reporter Neil MacDonald is here with me. Neil, what do we know about what is coming?
Well, not enough, I think you could say, given the importance of this decision to the next Parliament. I mean, the government has set out the total amount it wants to spend over the next 5 years, but hasn't said really much about how that cake is going to be divided. And it does look like people will now be voting without getting that information. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has worked on a possible scenario for what might happen, which does suggest there could be some big cuts coming for some departments. So they reckon that in the next 5 years, total spending will grow by 1% a year, allowing for inflation. But some areas, they say, will grow faster. The NHS will grow faster, of course. There's protections in place for defence and for aid and for childcare, which is due to grow very quickly. As they grow faster, something else has got to be shrinking. And they reckon that those unprotected budgets will get smaller by 2.3% a year in real terms. So there, Kathy, we're talking about prisons, we're talking about local government, we're talking about further education and the courts, all areas under a huge amount of pressure, shrinking not just 1 year by 2.3%, but potentially by 4 years in a row.
And I was talking about some of that with Yvette Cooper earlier, but is that inevitable, those figures that you're talking about?
No. I mean, the IFS says with £20 billion a year, you could avoid that. You could choose to raise that through taxes. You could choose, of course, to borrow that. I mean, clearly the Conservatives and Labour don't seem to favour that. Could you cut it from the benefits bill? Could you boost productivity in these areas enough to absorb these cuts? Maybe, but I think either of those options would also involve pretty difficult choices.
And you mentioned taxation. So what's the big picture on the wages that might pay for this?
Well, this would all be easier, these decisions, if we hadn't experienced 15 years of real wage growth basically stopping. And the Resolution Foundation says that that is basically what's happened. I can show you here what's average weekly earnings in the 21st century. And in real terms, you can see that basically they stopped growing around about the time of the 2008 financial crash. Now, the Resolution Foundation have imagined an alternative universe in which they carried on growing. And they reckon in that case, average weekly earnings in real terms right now will be £276 higher. Now, Kathy, that is £14,000 a year on average. And of course, higher wages would bring higher taxes, and that would make some of those choices on spending we were talking about earlier, they could have been a lot more generous.
Neil, thanks very much for joining us.